Kurt Cobain sang, "If she floats then she is not a witch like we had thought," but he was wrong. And witch burning is actually part of an emergent zeitgeist. I mean, has anybody compared Lucy Letby's weight to that of a loaf of bread? If not, they should sort this whole thing out. Oi oi, you alright? This is the ducking stool. And today, my lucky duckers, I will finally be looking at
the meagre YouTuber.
Crime Scene to Courtroom's latest steaming pile of content on Lucy Letby and Shu Lee, who John has completely bested in the art of neonatology. And yeah, I'm totally serious, so if that is a sneer across your face right now, stop it before I slap it off. John here has exposed Dr. Lee's incredible bias and prejudice. This has been really important to John because he is an evidence-led, logical thinker with no skin in the game whatsoever, except for a hatred of charlatans. Dr. Lee may have felt that his paper was misunderstood and misrepresented, but when he actually took the step of saying so publicly, he showed himself up as an irrational devotee of a serial baby killer. So, just by virtue of how he became concerned about it, tells us all that we need to know. He may as well be writing love letters to serial killers on death row for all of the difference it makes. Whatever he might like to say, his agenda is clear. And, I mean, the worst thing is they are approaching this with a presumption of innocence, which Lucy Letby has never been entitled to, ever. Although, thank God, people have picked up on it. And, I mean, lo and behold, look, it's happening again. More internationally renowned neonatologists trying to free a baby killer. How many times will we see them do this? And yes, Dowie Evans, he did say he identified foul play within 10 minutes of looking at some notes, but he's a speed reader, so there. I just really wonder where these people get off thinking that they have any right to speak, to be perfectly frank. And then to assume that anyone is interested in what they have to say. I mean, I am sorry, international panel of experts, but your agenda is very clear. We've got your number, and that, my dears, will be repeated on Twitter. So how others ignore this, I have no idea. And let us not forget that the newly issued brand new narrative, the true one, goes that the medical records were never even seen by this group of experts. It doesn't matter how many times this is competently refuted. It will keep being repeated ad nauseum until a new directive is issued. And yes, Professor Lee turned Canada's neonatal care rating from inadequate to the best in the world in 10 years. And he might have written over 400 papers and be generally to be considered a world-leading voice in the care of neonates. But that only works if you completely underestimate John. For all we know, he's got a score of undisclosed medical specialisms. I mean, does anybody know what his day job is? Do they? Did you? Nah. Oh yeah, he might speak with sneering condescension, whilst modestly describing himself as a meagre YouTuber. But he's busted Lee, yeah? He's shown him his ass. You may have cottoned on to John's enjoyment of youth culture with the tattoos and the graffiti and the hoodie and that, but did you know he was a rapper? Here he is, exclusive to this channel. Oh, that's fucking typical, isn't it? No, I can't play it for obscenity reasons. He's a lot of crotch grabbing, and also he's angry and very litigious. Still, the upshot is, translated into
The soul.
Plain civil English, Dr. Lee is wrong. So some stuff about representing Loughton, is it? Anyway, he's got 100,000 subscribers almost. And he has heaved out hundreds of hours of solid, fragrant content on Letby. He doesn't let a thing get past him, not never. So, sorry, 4 minutes, 20 odd seconds in. Let's finally get on to the issue at hand. Here's John.
In August 2023, former neonatal nurse Lucy Letby was convicted at Manchester Crown Court on 7 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder concerning patients under her care.
Now, cynics may call this gratuitous, but it's actually essential that he reiterates all of this at the beginning of every video because his viewers may be unaware.
A year later, she was subsequently convicted on a further count of attempted murder in relation to a case on the original indictment.
I don't like the way he talks. I mean, why mention further a year later, subsequently, referring to the original? I mean, it just seems really like trying very hard to be formal. Like saying purchasing rather than bought. It seems wanky. Anyway, do you reckon he ever does this introductory bit with a list of how many verdicts were unanimous?
She remains the UK's most prolific child serial killer in modern British history.
Once Lucy Letby is thoroughly cleared, I wonder how people will look back on this, the gullibility and the wish to believe. Even this picture of her with her cats is said to betray some inner evil, although I suppose having cats is a sign, isn't it?
However, recently a press conference took place in London, arranged pro bono by the PR agency Maltin.
Oh my God, the reaction to them using a PR company for this is what they're for. And what about the police holding private briefings with selected members of the press who had to sign non-disclosure agreements, which they lied about to Peter Hitchens, who asked for a recording and was refused, before wildly shitting the bed because he wrote about it. And I mean it. They were furious. Cheshire Police sold the rights to make a documentary on their investigation to the highest bidder. Ravi Jairam, despite failing in all of his professional duties when he suspected criminal harm had occurred, was in talks to make a mini-series about it starring himself and wouldn't answer about his commercial involvement. Then there's the high priestess of guilt sadists, Judith Moritz and Jonathan Coffey, writing Unmasking Lucy Letby, despite the parents saying they felt exploited and were distressed by it. Even Cheshire Police have their own PR person. All that was fine, but when you get a PR company doing what a PR company does, managing a press conference which has all of these people present, an MP, international press, is highly controversial, highly sensitive, presumably requiring a lot of security and being gifted for free. That's where it becomes sick, tasteless, mercenary. How cynical is that? They should have turned it down. These people tied themselves up in conspiratorial webs of mentalism while making profit from this series of tragedies, whether writing articles or making videos or books or whatever. That's fine. But the PR company, that was a step too far. And even the fact they're doing it for free is suspect.
And attended by the MP David Davis, Mark MacDonald, as well as others, and Dr. Shu Lee, who presented the press conference with his new findings in relation to Lucy Letby's convictions, claiming they found no evidence of murder or attempted murder. What also appeared after the press conference was a report written by a panel of 14 experts, again in relation to some of the babies in this case.
Before I get flashbacks of Christopher Snowdon clutching his grotty, clammy old pearls again, which are most unwelcome, it was a summary, not the report.
Now, this video seeks to explore what was actually withheld from the public during this press conference in relation to Lucy Letby's original trial.
Withheld? Nothing was withheld. They can't mention every single thing. And the main part of this is that poor John just didn't understand.
This has been made possible by the purchasing of court transcripts concerning Lucy Letby's original trial. So let's start at the beginning with the first child on this indictment, Baby A, also referred to as Baby 1 during the press conference, and Dr. Shu Lee's new explanation as to why Baby A may have died. Take a listen to the following.
And this is where John pulls a bit of a fast one. So, in the first 10 minutes of his 27-minute video, Dr. Lee speaks uninterrupted for 8.5, during which time he goes into a lot of detail. So that's quite a long time. John doesn't give any indication of what he will be talking about next, so the viewer doesn't have any idea of what to look out for. And after that, he essentially just reads the report, which is repeating everything Lee has just said. It's a truly magical way of stupefying with repetition. And I don't see what the need for this is, except for it confers an air of plausibility, scientific plausibility and comprehension. Because we're hearing these words coming out of his mouth. It's as if he is knowledgeably discussing medical terminology and doing so competently. I mean, otherwise, what is the point? He will read something out in detail and then, well, what does that mean? That must mean this. And we don't need you to explain it in your own words, John. Is there anything he'd get out of making his videos excessively long? Does he get more donations, more applause because he put hours into it? Because that is what it appears to be. And if so, fair play is an absolute masterstroke in manipulating the audience with, under the guise that he has been educating them, when in fact they're just facing a bombardment of information, carefully cherry-picked. Secure in the knowledge, when he then misrepresents it, his viewers will trust him. Additionally, he can say, this wasn't a deliberate mischaracterization. Look, I left him speak for ages. It just seems willfully manipulative and dishonest to me. And I suspect overwhelming the viewer, making non sequiturs that they then trust have been proven, is his thing. And for now, let's forget about the transcript controversy, because obviously some of them are freely available now. He recites them with the most absolutely crushingly protracted detail, reiterating and even adding in the discussions with the clerk, like, could you scroll down a little bit, Mr. Murphy? Tedious bullshit. Then he won't mention stuff that has been really critical. So it's not just that he'll read the court transcripts in excruciatingly protracted detail. He goes through loads of other stuff. He gossips and makes hyperbolic, sensationalist titles over minor slip-ups on words. Unnecessary, additional waffle. But when it comes to indiscrepancies between, well, say Ravi Jayaram's evidence, have we got any videos on that? Anything comparing his evidence with the first and second trial? Or how his version of events was directly challenged by Joanne Williams? Or how the swipe data affects actually several babies? And consequently blows Jayaram's testimony out of the water and shows him up as a liar. Or even how she was supposed to poison a baby with insulin when she wasn't in the building and hadn't been for hours. And the answer is no, he doesn't tackle any of this, which explains why his fans are so utterly rabid and woefully misinformed. I mean, the fact that many of them pay him, he's making money off of this, I would definitely want my money back. Seems like quite a damning indictment on an educator. But anyway, have a listen now and see if you're sensitive enough to pick up on the word he finds most relevant.
Take a listen to the following. The mother had antiphospholipid syndrome, which is a condition in which the immune system mistakenly creates antibodies that attack tissues in the body. These antibodies can trigger blood clots to form in arteries and veins. During pregnancy, antibodies can pass through the placenta to the neonate and lead to thromboembolism, particularly if there is concurrent infection. Post-mortem of baby 1 showed a recent non-occluding thrombus in the liver.
So we know that this poor little baby already had a blood clot, for goodness sake.
Which means there was a recent thrombotic event. On the day of collapse, baby 1 had 2 central catheters that were left without infusion for up to 4 hours, which predisposed to thrombosis when there is no infusion. Shortly after infusion was started in the most central line, baby 1 collapsed. A thrombus from the catheter tip likely migrated to an artery supplying the brainstem, causing sudden collapse and inability to resuscitate the infant.
Incidentally, Lucy Letby herself brought this up and said it may well have been a contributory factor in his death. Inactive lines, especially those as invasive as this, are a thrombosis risk. Central lines are supposed to be positioned just outside the heart valves. The margin of error in a premature baby is obviously tiny. A malpositioned central line can cause arrhythmia, thrombosis and arterial rupture, and pneumothorax or a collapsed lung. They knew this line was not in the correct position, and yet they still left it for 4 hours without infusion.
It is also possible that baby 1 had placental fetal vascular malperfusion, in which the fetal villi in the placenta present small thrombi that can travel to and occlude small blood vessels in major organs like the heart, brain and liver.
Why did this baby suddenly collapse? So we went into the history of this baby to see what actually happened. So in this baby, the mother had antiphospholipid syndrome, which is a condition in which the immune system mistakenly creates antibodies to attack tissues in the own body. Now, these antibodies can trigger blood clots to form in arteries and veins. And during pregnancy, these antibodies can pass through the placenta to the neonate and lead to thromboembolism, which means clotting in the baby.
So what's being stated here by Dr. Shuley, and in particular during the press conference, is that this child died from a blood clot. Just trying to put it in the simplest terms as possible. This child died due to a blood clot. Now, the reason that this child developed a blood clot in the first place is a combination of the care that was given to this child, but also, and critically, most importantly, the fact that the mother had antiphospholipid syndrome. And that's the reason that this child was much more susceptible to getting a blood clot in the first place. Let's just read that again. The mother had antiphospholipid syndrome, which is a condition in which the immune system mistakenly creates antibodies. Remember this word, ladies and gentlemen, antibodies that attack tissues in the body. These antibodies can trigger blood clots to form in arteries and veins.
He's hamming it up somewhat, isn't he, with the tension? The scalding repetition. I mean, what do you think this says about his view of his subscribers? You know, like, is he under the impression they're all Spanish waiters or something? What is he doing?
Can pass through the placenta to the neonate and lead to thromboembolism, particularly if there is concurrent infection. Now, what he hasn't told you, and the reason for the delay in my video today, is because I was waiting to receive the transcript from November 29th, 2022.
I think this is what's known as disappointed headmaster mode.
And the evidence given in court by Professor Sally Kinsey. Now, let's just give you a little bit of a background into Professor Sally Kinsey.
Yes, exactly. What we need now is some more detailed appeals to authority. I have absolutely no doubt that she's an expert and has, like, the relevant credentials. I mean, unfortunately, John, this is not going to cover up your arrogant mistakes. And just listen to his tone. Stuffy, pompous and sanctimonious. I can't help but picture him with like a little copper's notebook in hand. He sounds so much like an uptight Jobsworth copper. It's really poisoned the well for me.
Okay, so if anyone wishes to validate what I'm about to share with you,
what an arse.
This is day 40 of Lucy Letby's original trial, the 29th of the 11th, 2022. And again, reading from the official court transcript. The following is Professor Sally Kinsey's evidence in chief, where she's asked questions by the prosecuting barrister, Nicholas Johnson, KC.
Okay, well, I'm not going to put us all through these clips of John wittering on. Essentially, it can all be boiled down to this exchange.
Professor Sally Kinsey then goes on to discuss in great detail what antiphospholipid syndrome is, and then is asked the following question. Did the antiphospholipid syndrome pass to either child A or to child B? She replied, no, that is not the case.
Dr. Lee never claimed the baby had inherited the disorder. The fears were it may have affected him via placental crossover. As I don't have access to the transcripts, crime scene to courtroom does not explain enough or go into enough to the questions I have. But you should absolutely watch Michael McConville's The Other Side of Lucy Letby on Jabe's channel. He explains it is not a heritable condition. There may be a predisposition to it, but it is not something you inherit. But to have a positive diagnosis, you need to have 2 tests 12 weeks apart. And this poor baby only lived for 2 days. Also, I'd like to know how quickly antibodies can fluctuate, because counting on a blood test taken nearly 48 hours before his collapse, is that okay? Knowing it's not heritable makes this questioning look a bit sus to me. But ultimately, this is a non sequitur anyway, because 1, we know the baby did already have a thrombus. 2, Dr. Lee did also say it could have been placental malperfusion. And 3, he said the mother had it, not the baby.
Now, interestingly, this opinion of the expert here, and bearing in mind we're looking at a blood expert, a bona fide haematologist, this opinion appears to have been accepted not just by Lucy Letby herself, but also by her barrister Benjamin Myers KC, and also, you would imagine, Lucy Letby's experts from her original trial.
No expert defence witness took the stand for Lucy. And she was so disturbed and traumatised with PTSD that the trial actually had to be delayed because she couldn't speak properly and was incoherent, while having to defend herself against 15 charges of attempted murder and 7 of murder. Most importantly, it absolutely was challenged by Lucy and her defence. And I know that John knows that because I'm about to prove this with one of his own videos. So why the hell is he coming out with crap like that? For a channel that's meant to be all about the documented truth, his snide interjections and complete avoidance of anything awkward for him is pretty damn suspect and extremely dishonest. He's lying.
Baby A was born with antiphospholipid syndrome. There's the maternal history of high blood pressure and a previous stroke, so medication for that.
How is that accepting it? How is that an acceptance of what Kinsey said? Please explain. Also, I find it really shocking this woman had a stroke before she'd even had these babies. It's awful. Anyway, next we have Lucy Letby again, cross-examined by Nicholas Johnson, who's so reminiscent of an abusive partner. It's painful, genuinely painful to listen to.
Is it your case that the staffing levels in the Countess of Chester Hospital contributed to child A's death? She replies, in part, yes. Right, how? Through the amount of time that he was without fluids for and the issues around the lines insertion. Mr. Johnson, right, so he was without fluids from sometime about 4 p.m. or thereabouts, 3 or 4 p.m? Lucy replies, yes. So your case is what? That he died from dehydration?
I don't expect prosecution, particularly in egregious murder cases, to go easy on defendants. But Johnson's behaviour was near abusive.
She replies, no, I'm saying they're contributing factors. But according to you at least, how did that lack of fluids for about 4 hours contribute to his death? What's your case?
So he's a premature twin who's gone 4 hours without any fluids. The line is malpositioned but is left, and the multiple attempts at venous access will be painful, along with any other health problems he was struggling with. Hydration is essential for everything, but especially in the prevention of thrombosis. Blood becomes viscous with too little water, which causes a lot of problems, including clots. Dehydration is obviously a risk in any baby, but especially those who are premature. The advice online is that if your baby under 6 months hasn't drunk in 4 hours, you need to seek medical advice. And again, it just seems that the care at the Countess of Chester was appalling. So while Lucy is effectively mocked while in the dock for stating this, sounds like actually she's raised something that was really important and Johnson is just doing his abusive husband routine.
She replies that it would have put him at an increased risk of collapse and he would have had less reserves to then fight off any infection or any procedure that we were doing.
Which sounds entirely reasonable.
Mr. Johnson, so it's your case that 4 hours without fluids killed child A?
In the context of a trial where she is fighting for her life under the hostile gaze of the parents, and having been on remand for years, having lost her home, her cats, her life, developing post-traumatic stress disorder, being on protection in prison due to the threats against her, spending 5 hours a day in a prison van to and from court and prison. This relentless, bellicose Kathy Newmanism, it's just fucking disgusting.
She replies, no, that's not what I'm saying, no. What? She replies, I can't tell you how child A died, I don't know. Okay, but they're contributing factors that were missed. Mr. Johnson, is it your case that the competence of the medical staff contributed to child A's death? She replies, again, I can't say definitively how child A died, but yes, I think the issues around his lines made him more vulnerable, yes. Nicholas Johnson, and what issue around his lines made him more vulnerable? That he was left with a line in situ, a UVC, that was not for use and was due to be removed, and it wasn't. And then having a long line sighted and time passing by without that line being connected to anything and being confirmed on X-ray. It's not usual practice.
And would you believe it? It looks like she was exactly right. As you can see here, the umbilical lines also go straight up to the heart. Anyway, back to Sally Kinsey, where she explains why she believes the condition was not inherited.
She replied, "You would find the antibodies in the blood, one type, only the IgG, which is not significant in the children."
This is where the detail kind of ends, so it's impossible to know, but it just seems like an unacceptably nebulous and kind of woolly answer to me. Because this is a woman's life hanging in the balance. I mean, it'd be good to know how quickly antibodies could fluctuate, or if false negatives are an issue, or just precisely what the antibody load was. But the strongest impression I get is that John is immensely proud of himself and has puffed up his chest and done a little bit of strutting. Here is a visualisation for you. And he is especially pleased with himself during the exchange between Myers and Kinsey.
Take a listen to the following. This is the cross-examination of Professor Sally Kinsey by Benjamin Myers, KC. In that report, you go through the background relating to child A, as you have done in your evidence today. And at the end of the report, you can see at the bottom of page 7, you set out your summary and opinion, which goes over the page, in fact. She replied, yes. And your summary and opinion is focused on the question of whether or not there is any hematological abnormality, or whether maternal antiphospholipid syndrome played a part in what happened to child A. She replied, yes. And your conclusion in summary and opinion is that they didn't. She replied, yes. He responds, I am not disputing that.
Psst, John, he's not disputing that's her opinion.
I am not disputing that.
God, this is painful. I think next time I listen to him, I'm going to have to take a prophylactic potassium to stop the cringe cramps.
Now, to your average member of the viewing public,
Those twats.
This press conference would come across as incredibly compelling, particularly when Dr. Shu Li discusses air embolism. Now,
Why particularly when he talks about air embolism? Why? Oh, it's a segue.
During the press conference itself, Dr. Shu Li asserts that there is absolutely no evidence of venous air embolism. And this is due to the fact that any air injected into a child would need to pass through the lungs, where any air bubbles would be subsequently filtered out.
Yeah. I would watch Dr. Lee's presentation rather than this dipshit summary.
However,
I think reverberations from that however hit the Richter scale.
what Dr. Shu Li doesn't tell the press conference or the wider public at large, is the fact that child A died with a patent foramen ovale.
As I'm not familiar with this term, this could easily have slipped by me earlier. Go on.
Also known as a PFO. Take a listen to the following.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. John is getting technical now. Where's the clip? Show me the clip.
Here comes the science bit. Concentrate.
A foramen ovale is a small hole between the two upper chambers of the heart called the atria. It's a small slit-like defect that occurs in utero, in normal fetal cardiovascular development. And it allows for oxygenated blood to bypass the fetal lungs. And upon birth, after the first breath or so, that slit-like opening closes, except it persists and it does not close in about 25% of individuals.
Yes, that is right. 1/4 of us still have this slit-like opening in our hearts. And as this doctor goes on to explain, it requires no maintenance or observation, no medication, nothing. It's clinically insignificant unless it exists with other conditions. So 99% of the time it's no issue whatsoever. And as you may imagine, if you think, premature babies are far more likely to have this, and it often takes up to a couple of years to fully fuse or heal over. So why precisely does John think he has struck upon such a gotcha here? Because he believes this was not mentioned at all, even though As I'm about to show you, Shuli very much does mention it. But he's decided to ignore that, or was just too excited by what he feels is his own special access to the truth, which I strongly suspect is very much backed up, aided and abetted by idiots on Twitter who have always got an answer to everything that comes out about Lucy Letby. Answers that appear to, well, they spring up and then are recited in unison by this clique of people in such a coordinated way, it seems unlikely it's a coincidence to me. As I mentioned before, he was using the troll glasses, which was an in-joke sort of meme between these people. So I guess that's where he's getting his information from, because it's precisely what they are saying. But John, with his love of repetition, has now gone on again with some incredible hubris to imagine that he is a fantastic medical science communicator and explains the relevance of this to us plebs.
So in simple terms, this basically means that there is a small slit or opening in the heart. Now, this allows blood to travel between the right and left atrium, avoiding the lungs.
Oh, well, you could just listen to his shit content and by his tone believe that he has really struck upon gold here, but alas, no.
Therefore, any air injected into a vein in a baby with a PFO would cause the symptoms this child experienced.
I don't know if it's correct to say that this child experienced or exhibited these symptoms, but whatever. But again, the claim he's making is pretty bold, isn't it? I mean, if this is an anatomical feature from our fetal development that still 1/4 of us possess, then surely our blood is not regularly missing out on oxygenation from our lungs, those of us who have had our umbilical cords cut anyway. Otherwise, I imagine it would have some clinical significance. What do you think? This is just so fucking obvious. So, yeah, let me play the little clip that John included, but in his rush to claim a win over Shuli, kind of forgot was in his own fucking video.
Now, in newborn babies, there's a hole called the foramen ovale in the heart, which can allow the blood to actually move over to the arterial system. But it has to go against pressure, because the pressure in the arterial system is higher than in the venous. And so what we found in the literature was that there were no cases that have been described where, in fact, these skin rashes have occurred.
Now, this is important because the rash only occurs in 10% of arterial air embolisms, never through the venous system. And this is because arteries are what carries blood to organs, whereas the veins carry it back. Dr. Lee is explaining that it is only when it is in the arterial system and that blood is pushed into the skin that you would see the rash. And obviously, if you needed reminding, here it is. 6 of these babies had postmortems and none were found to have the characteristic frothy, bloody mess in the heart, which causes the tragic consequences of an air embolism. Now, because of the foramen ovale, John is contending that the blood goes through the veins and somehow in the chambers of the heart skips over into the arterial system where you then see the rash. And he's being quite forthright about this, even though the rash is only seen in 10% of venous air embolism cases anyway. It has even been suggested by his handlers on Twitter that the force Lucy Letby would have used to inject this air would somehow have forced the venous system's pressure to supersede that of the arterial system, as if veins are not full of valves. And yes, I fully understand that I am doing what I accused John of doing in explaining medical information, but let me give this disclaimer. I'm an entire fuckwit, and have no qualifications whatsoever or advice from anyone with such qualifications. So please listen to the whole of Shu Li's presentation, which I cannot show on here for reasons of a crap old phone having nowhere near the storage that allows me to do this. So that is why I haven't posted a video in ages, and why I'm going to cut this one off here, although I have done 35 minutes, so that's not too bad. Hopefully it will upload, and I will catch up with the rest of his excreted knowledge another time. Thank you very much for bearing with me, and yeah, I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.
The time now, very nearly 3 o'clock. The next programme on BBC One, Songs of Praise, follows at 3:15 after a trade test transmission.
Got an agenda. Don't have an opinion. And I've also got some emojis and member badges being made at the moment for people of the stream, like members of the stream. So they've got their own badges and special emojis that they'll be able to use throughout the live stream. I've got that in the pipeline currently.